Hello and welcome to Senior Moments. I'm Richard Mullen, your host. This is a program about seniors, for and about things that you're interested in, things you may want to do, things you may not want to do. Today we have some very interesting guests, and we're going to talk about why recycle. Our guests today are Kristen Walth, and she's from Towards Zero Waste Communities in Newburyport, and Steve Lasauskas, and he's with Waste Zero. And you're on a national level, on a national and international level.
Exactly.
And so they're going to talk a little bit about what they do. We do have a common interest in developing a waste program so that we can reduce some of the waste in our cities and towns. And also, I'm going to be challenging seniors in the communities to put a couple of hours a week into being part of a recycling program in libraries, senior centers, and in different organizations in both cities and towns. And we'll talk about that more later. But today I want to get some information out of these folks because they have a lot of information and they're going to be a resource to us. So Kristen, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you are and what you're doing right now?
So Towards Zero Waste Communities is developed out of a pilot program called Towards Zero Waste Newburyport, and we learned a bunch of things, and we're very interested in reducing waste at every level, primarily so that we reduce costs as far as what we have to take to the incinerators, but also as far as reducing demand for incinerator capacity. So Towards Zero Waste Newburyport did this pilot program, and we learned 4 key things. But the biggest thing, number 4, that really made everything come together is the idea of treating waste as a utility, so that individuals and households are responsible for their own, what they generate. And that's how we learned about Waste Zero. Waste Zero has a program that makes this all come together. And I think it might be really interesting to hear what Steve has to say. He ran some numbers for Haverhill that might be interesting to hear about what Haverhill could learn from doing pay-as-you-throw.
Mm-hmm. No, that'll be really great. I love the waste as utility because especially in a town like Newburyport, everybody's trying to save money in every corner they can. They're very active, and that's one thing I think if you can pass that on to the rest of us in the different communities. And Steve, Waste Zero.
Sure.
What do you do?
Well, as you mentioned, we're an international company. We work in 42 states here in the U.S. with about 100 communities in Massachusetts, 800 nationwide. And what we help communities do is reduce trash and increase recycling. And as Kristen mentioned, treating waste like a utility. So when you look at water, when you look at electricity, people pay for what they use, but it wasn't always that way. Electricity used to be everybody pays the same. Water used to be that way as well. We decided to treat it as a utility and meter it because it made sense. When you meter water, water usage drops by about 30%. Mm-hmm. People still use what they need, but waste is reduced. Electricity is the same thing. Solid waste is the same thing. It's actually an average of about a 44% reduction. And what happens when you reduce trash and increase recycling is you start taking the paper, cardboard, metals, plastic, very valuable materials out of the trash and you start recycling it, creating jobs. So we help cities and towns implement programs, design and implement programs to do just that. Increase employment, save money at the incinerator or at the landfill, mm-hmm. and improve our environment.
Wow, this is getting exciting. You know, when you think of it in piecemeal, the idea is interesting. Mm-hmm. But when you start to hear about it as a utility, now there are some arguments against that. And have you heard a valid argument against using it as an utility? Like, are certain people affected? Are certain people not? Like, when you talk about utility, I think of the house down the street. Every week they put out 10 and 12 bags of trash, and they got 4 barrels, and there's mounds of it. And I wonder if they collect it, or does it really come out of their house? And so, yeah. I mean, that's one of the things for it, I presume.
Right.
But are there any anti-type of ideas, or is there something against it?
So sometimes we'll hear people talk about it's unfair to people, it's unfair to large families. So I have a similar situation that the street that I live on, it was all developed by the same developer at the same time in the 70s. So we all have the same house, we all have the same home values. My neighbors to the left are in their 90s, and they put out one small CVS bag every 2 weeks.
Wow.
I have two, I have a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we put out 1/2 bag a week. And my other neighbor puts out 6 bags a week. We're all paying the same. He's shifting his cost over to my 93 and 95-year-old neighbors. So some of the arguments that we hear are, it would be unfair to large families. But we don't give large families free electricity or free water or free clothing. Almost our whole economy is based on you pay for what you use. So solid waste, some people will be concerned about the impact on people who have lower incomes or people who have larger families. You can design programs to address those issues, but fundamentally our whole economy is based on paying for what you use. So it's kind of, I mean, the answer is it's kind of fair to do it that way. If you want to generate more, you can pay for it. You don't have to generate more because almost everything we use is recyclable.
Wow, that's an amazing. Now, on a local level in Newburyport, when I first met Kristen, I mean, you had a little bag and you said, "This is my trash for the week or the month." What was it?
That was for a year and a half.
And it was I mean, describe. Am I right that it was a plastic bag with a few things in it?
That's correct.
What did you do?
So a lot of what I do is, in 2011, I decided to live zero waste, and I collected absolutely everything that I did not know how to recycle or whatever. And what came of that is learning how to avoid and reduce. So just as an example, I started out with toothpaste tubes. I thought, I don't know how to get rid of these responsibly. Well, there's a group called TerraCycle, and I learned that you can recycle toothpaste tubes through TerraCycle. But even better, I can use baking soda and peppermint extract and coconut oil and make my own toothpaste, which my dentist has fully approved, and I have even less packaging. And so it's just been a case of, when I do that, all of my recycling, when I use the baking soda and the peppermint extract and the coconut oil, all of the packaging is recyclable, curbside recycling. It makes money for the city, and I have nothing that I need to worry about afterwards. So there are ways to do reuse, reduce, reuse, etc. But a lot of it is avoiding too.
Yeah, avoidance seems to be, when I go through the big stores, the Walmarts and the Kmarts and places like that, there's a lot of opportunity to buy lots of things.
Right.
Yes.
And I think people do that. And when I buy something plastic, I find in about 3 weeks I don't need it.
Right.
I say, why did I buy that? You know,
Right.
I'm not going to use this. This does. So I guess the education part of it is to get people to think. I'm amazed. The toothpaste things, we talked about that briefly. I want to know, there is a program to recycle those?
Yes, there is. TerraCycle is an organization that primarily runs through schools, and schools can collect through different brigades and then ship these materials off to TerraCycle and actually make a little tiny bit of money. Not much, but make some money. And it goes hand in hand very nicely with doing something with the Waste Zero program, because you find different ways of avoiding having to put things in your trash.
Have you come across anything else that's like in a larger scale? Is anybody doing anything bigger in that idea, like with toothpaste tubes? Is there something out there that we don't know about that maybe on a local and a regional level we can do?
Absolutely. So when I look at just numbers for Haverhill, and we can talk about this for Amesbury and Newburyport and every community in between, just last year alone, residents of Haverhill threw away 2.2 million pounds of sweaters, pants, shoes, some of which are reusable, all of which are recyclable. So 2.2 million pounds worth of this material that they could just go down the street and drop in one of the textiles drop boxes that are all over the place.
Yeah.
So a number of cities and towns are looking and saying, what can we do to target that piece of waste? Because, I mean, what's more wasteful than throwing out a good sweater or drapes that could be turned into wiping rags?
What kind of, like, in a cost effect, what does that compute to, like, dollar-wise? Let's say that did you say 6%? Did I hear 6% is what we throw away in clothing and shoes?
Just about. It depends what community you're in, but
Yeah.
5 to 6%, yes.
And have you seen any dollar value of that?
I have, actually. So the clothes are separated into two groups. There's the high quality and everything else. So the high quality is about 15% of the material. And that sells for anywhere between $1,100 and $1,300 a ton. The most valuable material in recycling would be those textiles. More valuable than metal, plastic, everything else combined.
Okay.
Then the other part is the 85% is material that's not going to be resold at a Goodwill or a Salvation Army. It's going to be used for another purpose. Maybe it becomes insulation in a car or a house, or it gets shipped overseas, and that would be worth a couple $100s a ton. But overall, you're looking at maybe, let's call it $300 to $400 a ton for reusable textile, or for textiles in general, which makes it an incredibly valuable commodity that people are throwing in the incinerator today.
Yeah, when I do, and as I think about it, I'm guilty. When I throw stuff in the trash, and I've thrown clothes in, and I always think when I'm throwing in, and I say, what a waste.
Right.
You know, it's in my head that it's not the right thing to do. And I think that's one of the things that Kristen and I talked about. We have a mutual partner in our program in EchoSmith, who is going to work with us to get some programs going around this area as a collector of clothes.
Right.
And then return the money to local nonprofits, which is great.
Exactly.
And I mean, it seems to me like I'm wondering on a larger trend. Is the government, overall, federal government, are they looking at this closely? Do they see that their responsibility, or is it mostly just kind of a local, state-by-state effort?
So it's typically a state-by-state effort. Of the states, Massachusetts does a pretty good job. That's not to say we're doing wonderfully. I mean, if you look at the city of Worcester, the average resident in Worcester throws away 314 pounds of trash per year. The average across Massachusetts is more than double that. So Worcester does a phenomenal job. 12 colleges, high exactly. High level of multifamily, English as a second language percentage. A lot of things that people normally consider challenges to recycling, but they do a phenomenal job. Many communities are twice, in some instances 3 times what Worcester generates. So we do a good job in Massachusetts. There are some places that are shining examples, and many places that don't do a great job, but the federal government leaves it to the state. Okay. Massachusetts has a plan to help cities and towns reduce waste, but there's not been much, if any, action on that plan. There's no connection between that plan and cities and towns.
So, like, I think between Kristen and I, our interest is the grassroots effect.
Exactly.
And it seems to me that if, from my point, if as a group we can start to get all of our senior citizens involved, because they meet regularly. They meet at senior centers. And many of them will tell me, well, I want something to do.
Right.
And this seems to be like almost the perfect match if we could just get them out there. And in your community, is there anything unique that's been happening that you saw happen in Newburyport?
Well, as far as the pilot, we saw lots of, we ran the pilot in 2012, and 141 families opted to participate. And we gave them 3 different things to do. Number 1, we wanted to make sure that they were doing their curbside recycling at the optimal level, that they understood exactly what goes in and exactly what goes out. We wanted to give them these other opportunities. I call them non-traditional recycling, and that's the things like the TerraCycle and the electronics, and making sure they understood where textile recycling could take place, and trying to make that as much more convenient for people as well. The third thing were organics, getting organics out of the waste stream through backyard composting or curbside collection. And once again, those 3 things, we had our families weighing their trash, their recycling, and their organics for a long period of time. I would not recommend to anybody that wants to keep friends to ask people to do this. But what it all came out with is these people were self-selected, so they were highly motivated, but they were decreasing their garbage by 50 to 80%.
Wow.
So a lot of families came back to me and said, why don't we have to do this? Why isn't this something that we all do? Because think about what that could mean to our city finances. Think about what that money could do elsewhere in the community. And that's how we started talking to Waste Zero to learn about how to implement programs that makes it an incentive for everyone to participate.
And from Newburyport's point, and working with Waste Zero, where do you think you stand now? Are you 10% into the, I guess how am I want to, what effect did you have on Newburyport? Have you had any effect at all?
I'm going to be honest and say we've had minuscule effect. What we need to do is we put together different plans and we put together different actions that we wanted to invest in. My regret is that we did not invest in pay-as-you-throw or trash as a utility up front, because it would have made all of these other pieces fall together much better.
Oh yeah, no, it seems like that. But no, just here's a question, a personal question. I'm thinking if you were coming over my house, I'd need some lead time before you could come in, because do you notice people are hiding their trash and everything when you go visiting?
No, not at all.
You know
what?
the recycling ladies coming?
Oh, no, most of the time, I have friends that are leaving trash out saying, what do I do with this? What do I do with this?
Okay.
What do I? So no, this is, and that I think is a huge thing, and I think Steve will agree with this, is trying to use the stick is not working. So why not use it as a carrot and incentivize households to reduce, because then they don't have to purchase as many bags. They see that they have a direct effect.
I think one of the things is, as I sort of step back and look at it statewide and nationally, is what Kristen's done, what Zero Waste Newburyport has done, is establish an infrastructure. Right now I have a place that I can put the toothpaste tubes and CDs and other what's called a hard to recycle item. I have some place to put my food waste. But then what is the city saying to people? Put out the trash and we'll take it. It could be those 6 bags, it could be the 10 bags, it could be a mountain of trash, we'll still take it. So you have the infrastructure in curbside recycling, in curbside organics, in curbside textiles. But when you start aligning that infrastructure with an actual incentive for folks that says, if you put it in this bag, it's going to cost you more. Then people start saying, it's going to cost me more? Let me use that infrastructure that Zero Waste Communities established, and now you start shifting tonnage over. And we've had curbside recycling in Massachusetts for 30 years. And we're still throwing millions of pounds, millions of tons.
Yeah, the incentive, you're right, the incentive is not there.
Exactly.
What can we do, like, I mean, that was my interest in getting together with you. As we go through, like, our target area is, you know, people we're working with in Amesbury and people in Georgetown, people in Haverhill, and some of the smaller communities. What can we do? What should we do to get action, to make things start happening? Any ideas?
Well, I do have one idea that's a little bit self-serving, and that's invite Towards Zero Waste Communities to come and give a presentation that talks about what we learned from our pilot program, and like I said, our 4 points, how we can set up the infrastructure and how looking at garbage as a utility can help bring this all together. I would be delighted to come out and speak, and most of the time I can twist Steve's arm to come as well. And it turns, to be honest, it usually evolves into more of a conversation and discussion, information exchange, than it is per se a presentation, if you will. So we'd love to offer that up.
Okay, no, that'd be great. And I mean, you can't get burnt out. I mean, you can't do too many small ones, but if we were able to put together something of size where we had maybe 50 or 70 people that are interested.
Absolutely.
That's the key, is that they're interested in learning about this. And then we can kind of spread the word, because I think like a community like Haverhill and Northern Essex Community College, you know, those are things, and I'll talk to the people at Cool to see if they'd want to be involved.
That'd be great.
Because it's a way to touch people, boy, and get them. So let's say this, we are looking to working with EchoSmith, we'll put a bin in a certain area and identify a nonprofit that'll get the money. What we'd like to do is to say, as to kind of start that process, is to have 2 or 3 educational tables around that on a particular Saturday, and then invite people to come down, or some of the place in Amesbury, the Chestnut Innovation Center, that has said they use their cafeteria as a community resource. So we can go there, and if it's a bad day, we can go inside, good day outside. So we're identifying now several places. I know there's a place in Georgetown that can be used, and we can invite the community to come So that's something, do you think, who would you recommend? How's the way to make it happen so that we just don't talk about it and then 2 weeks, a year from now, we'll say, remember we were talking about that?
Right.
What a great idea that was. Why don't we do something?
When I look at it, I think of what Kristen's doing. I think of your suggestion that in talking to seniors who are looking for a way to be even more engaged in their community, is you need the passionate champion. You need someone who says, this is really important to me, and will talk to their neighbors about it. And will talk to other people. So going to the fireworks and having a table there or having a sign there, having people who, when you see your neighbor taking out the trash, you see your neighbor playing with their kids, hey, by the way, did you see the new bin down the street that we can put our textiles in? Giving people information and having some people say, you want to know what, I'm going to spend those 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week to help increase recycling, to talk to people about it. That's huge. That cannot be underestimated.
So it's word of mouth. It's networking, doing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But it's also not just networking and word of mouth, but also making it easy, having some of the champions there to help with the convenience factor so that it's not seen as a huge burden as far as time. So you mentioned bringing in the EcoSmith recycling bins. If you have 3 of those, that means they're more convenient for that many more people. If you only have 1, it's much easier to throw this in the trash than it is to drive across town to the bin. So working on the convenience factor, as Steve mentioned, having a couple of people as champions that are willing to put in some time so that it saves other people time is something that is a key to success.
And I think also the most effective thing would be to treat solid waste as a utility, because then everybody in the whole community is saying, I don't want to put this sweater in the trash bag, I'm gonna move it over. But
No, I know I worked on the smoke-free community programs a couple of years ago, and they were very effective. Is there any way to get any materials that are available so that handouts, usually like, I don't know, through your groups or any, is there anything you know about that if we wanted to collect information and put them on tables, is there anything available?
Certainly. With the communities we work with, we develop material to help people think about recycling, help improve recycling all the time. We're happy to provide that. We can obviously provide it on our website for folks, or we can provide it directly to you for distribution at the different table events.
Now, wait a minute. Shouldn't we be just using websites rather than paper, come to think of it? I'm just asking for paper. But
we
no,
want to
we could
reach
do a loop,
people
huh?
in the way that people feel most comfortable.
Okay.
So I actually prefer websites because I look up everything on my phone, but there are a lot of people who don't. And I think getting the cost of the paper from an environmental perspective versus the lessons that can be learned.
Right.
So it's a trade-off, right?
Well, I look at, if I give you a piece of paper and that helps you increase paper recycling, that one piece of paper may have increased recycling by 1 pound of paper.
Right.
So, as Kristen was saying,
small investment.
it's the trade-off, but it's
Okay.
a very small investment, high
No,
return.
that sounds really interesting, because as I start to think of this, but there are resources out there, and both of you folks have, I'm sure, more resources that if we need them, we can put them together. Because I was very impressed by when I went out to actually visit EcoSmith's recycling system with the owner, and I said, what I like about it, I can talk to the owner, so if there's a problem or something I don't like,
Right.
I can talk right to him, and he told me, he says, like, I said, the big thing with recycling bins is I always see a mattress or a chair. I said, that's why I wouldn't want it in my area. He says, we pick them up within 24 hours.
Right.
I said, how can you do that? He says, we do it because we're small, and that's our whole thing. So I really like that. I think the potential is out there as we get more people more involved in the communities.
Right.
And then the money going back to the communities. Like,
It's huge.
are you working with any nonprofits or that you work with now that are getting money back from like the bins that are in town?
The EcoSmith bins in Newburyport go back to the PTOs. But one of the things I'm interested in is a program that Waste Zero has that they haven't had a lot of uptake on, if I understand correctly. But it's a way to recognize or to channel savings funds into particular opportunities. So one of the things that I hear a lot is, I'm not interested in doing something because I'm not sure where the money is going. Well, Waste Zero has programs that can help cities have people in communities see where the money savings is going.
So they could track that and get a sense of it, and it gives them they're involved. There's
Right.
a sense of involvement there, and this is what we're gaining. And I think that's important. I think because I always think, trash is somebody else's problem.
Exactly.
I mean, really, that's how it's always seemed to me. And I as we talk, I'm saying, boy, what a slob I was, And I'm trying to think of all the things I did and that I shouldn't have done, throwing things. But I think the educational potential is so great here. Now, I think from the learning factor, I don't think it takes a whole lot to learn to recycle.
No.
Does it?
No, it doesn't.
And if we could just get the commitment. Let's say if you and I teamed up, or if you wanted to be in, and we had people come, and even if they were seniors or their friends or relatives, it didn't have to matter what age they were, we could do a fairly good workshop where we could all learn something in an hour, 90 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And when people walked out of there, they probably would have been excellent recyclers. Would that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Newburyport has created, Towards Zero Waste Newburyport has created a couple of documents. One of them is a 30-page document that talks about how you can be the best waste diversion citizen possible in Newburyport. And my dream would be that every community adopts this and customizes it for themselves. And we also have a list of 672 items that are non-traditional items with different ways of recycling them or places that take them. Just as an example, tennis balls.
Well, yeah, what isn't interesting? So you can...
There's a place
I'd love to see that list. What is it?
I'd be happy to send it to you.
Good, that's a cool list. That's actually fun. I bet, anything else interesting on there that's between tennis ball?
Oh, of course, when I'm in the spotlight, I can't think of anything. But it is, again, it's another tool so that if you're using waste as a utility, a pay-as-you-throw program, you can say, I don't want to waste any space with my dead tennis balls. Right. I'll look up on the list and see what other things can be done.
And I think what we're going to do as we get more involved in this is we're going to do a special half hour on the electronic recycling, the light bulbs, all that stuff that goes in, and tubes, everything that can do it. So we could actually do this and maybe move into some very specific things.
Yeah.
And to show people what they can do, because I know electronics, fortunately a lot of people are collecting electronics now.
Exactly.
Like computers, because there is some money in it. People will pay money to nonprofits, I guess, and so that's one of the cool things.
And as I think about a recycling event where we talk to people about recycling, let's say there's 50 people there, how can we help those 50 people? How can we scale that? How can we take it beyond those 50 people and have those 50 people help 50 people who help 50 people? If you look at just Haverhill, we can double it for the whole region, but just Haverhill, where people are paying to throw about 1.7 billion pounds of recycling in the trash every year. That's 1.7 billion pounds.
It's kind of hard to compute. I have to think about 1.7 billion pounds, and then you try to imagine what that looks like.
It's hard.
Listen, we could go on forever, but we're coming to the end of this show. So, first of all, we're going to get back together. I'm going to talk to some of the senior centers and people in our region, and let's try to put together a at least 30 days. So that's a good goal, right?
Wonderful.
And you guys can get contact. I've learned a lot. I feel guiltier than I did when I started, which is good. Guilt is a good motivator, so I got to go home and look at all my trash now. But I want to thank you for coming here. It was great. I think we started maybe, I hope, a conversation, and I hope that all the communities that are in our viewing area will see this, especially in Haverhill and Georgetown and Amesbury and the communities we've been going into. So I want to thank my guest and thank you for tuning in and listening. I hope we've all learned something. I hope we can take it home and do something with it. Thank you.